Well, how's everyone doing today? This is Bob Gums bringing you the Concerned Forum on a nice rainy Friday here in New York City, a wet day in Manhattan. Now, folks, for this particular episode of the Forum, I'm going to call this the Great Con. Two things about that. Number one, and for the sake of transparency, I am a progressive Democrat, extremely progressive. I believe that progress is about the future, not something that should be denigrated, number one. Number two, we have a situation right now in America. We got two parties. I mean, I know there's a bunch of other local and smaller parties, but basically we are a two-party nation. I'm not going to argue right now whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just stating the facts. In other words, what it is, right? One of the parties believes in democracy. They're not perfect. They don't stand up as much as I think that they need to on certain issues, but generally speaking, they're an American party devoted to the American people. The other party, of which I was brought up in, by the way, they seem to believe that democracy now has become a bad thing. I guess primarily because they notice that people don't particularly care for them. Now, we have this Republican lady down in South Carolina, and she had some of the right answers, but I don't think she understands the questions. She made mention of the fact that the Republican Party in the last national elections, the last 8 national elections, the Republican Party has won, I think, once out of 8. 7 times they have been body slammed. And there's a reason for that. It's because, A, on many subjects, they have no policy, and B, the policy answers that they do have on the issues, the majority of the American people don't care for it, quite frankly. Abortion is a prime example. Or I should say, maybe we need to stop calling it abortion and call it what it is, the right to choice. The Republican Party doesn't believe in that. And see, that's why I would tell my fellow Democrats, stop emphasizing so much, well, we're going to run the election next year against Trump, or we're going to run the election next year against possibly DeSantis, or any other Republican, with 2 exceptions, which, trust me, in the primary, it ain't going to happen. Excuse me, in the Republican primary, it ain't going to happen. One is Sununu up in New Hampshire. A lot of his policies I don't like, but if I went to bed knowing that he won the presidency of the United States, I would not have nightmares, right? And the other guy, what's his name? He was the last governor of Maryland. Kind of big, heavy-set fellow. And he's a decent man. He's a decent man. And then possibly Kasich. But none of the 3 people that I mentioned, the Republicans in the primaries, they would not have the sense to nominate one of those 3. For the most part, the rest of the Republicans who were running the primary, how do you call them? Dogs, okay? They don't have a snowball's chance of a snowball's chance in hell of winning a Republican primary, unfortunately. This really is the Republican Party's problem. Their problem, for the most part, is their base. And just about all of them, with a few exceptions, acknowledge that fact. And unfortunately for them, the majority of people in this country do not hold the same opinions that the Republican base holds. The majority of Americans, they don't want to go backwards. They don't want their Medicaid and Medicare to be taken away. They definitely don't want their Social Security to be tampered with or taken away. And the Republicans, they don't seem to understand that, or they refuse to understand that. And see, that is their problem. That's why they're constantly screaming and whining. Oh, why do you always pick on Trump? Well, the reason, and I'll be quite frank about it, Trump gets picked upon is because he's a liar. Okay? He's disloyal to America. And I feel sorry for people that can't see that after watching the antics of this clown since 2014, when he, called himself stepping on the national stage. And, it's sad to watch the party of Lincoln degenerate itself into some type of, strange new type of Nazi party. And I kid you not, if you listen to a lot of the Republicans across the country, a lot of the words that they use, the phrases that they put out, I mean, it could be 1933 in Berlin. And I don't think that that's good for democracy. I'm sorry. And no, I'm not being hyperbolic. A prime example is the governor of Florida, DeSantis. It really, I find it so amazing that this guy, now I understand from, what is that? Not Tampa, Miami, is it Miami Herald? They had a story about DeSantis' grandmother, the fact that as a young girl, she could not land in the United States because she was, she was pregnant, Hey, it happens to everybody. And at that time, in the national law here in the United States, folks like Italians and people from, what the hell is that, Borneo, yeah, I know, it's really weird. But yeah, folks like that were not allowed into the country. So what she did, she hid her pregnancy, and that's how she was able to, come into America. Eventually, family became citizens. Now, I really, people like DeSantis, I really have a lot of contempt for, and I'll tell you why. He is not too different from Donald Trump, right? In the sense, both of these guys were born on third base. And, they want you to believe that they hit a home run in life. And obviously that's not the case, right? Trump was born with a silver foot stuck up his butt. Born with a golden foot stuck up his butt. And DeSantis, in many ways, it's very similar. DeSantis was able, through his family, through his immigrant family, he was able to come to America and basically live the American dream, right? He went to good universities. I think he went to, Harvard and Yale. And he was a naval officer, reserve naval officer. And he did well for himself. decided to get into conservative politics, which is a very good thing in North Florida. And now he wants to deny people from south of the border the same opportunities that his family was able to achieve. And, you know, I really consider that pretty damn, pardon the expression, pretty damn shitty. When you basically, by the grace of the Creator, you were able to live almost an ideal life. But you turn around and try and deny that from people from Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, Africa, Dominican Republic, you know, and you know, other places. And you know, I look at people like that, and I say, apparently nobody ever taught him the expression, "There, but for the grace of God, goes I." Something like that wouldn't register with a person like DeSantis. Just like with Trump, there's really no difference. And, you know, he wants to get on this anti-immigrant thing. You're going to take poor, frightened people, jam them in a bus in the middle of the night or on a jet plane, and ship them to some other part of the country they know nothing, you know, really nothing of. And somehow, to me, that smells, you're really dancing in and out, in between illegalities, quite frankly. Pretty damn close to kidnapping, to tell you the truth. And we are supposedly a great nation. And great nations are not supposed to conduct themselves that way. We are supposed to be the example for the world, okay? We are not supposed to be shipping people across the country, all right? If you don't want the immigrants to come into Florida, Mr. DeSantis, then you should have the guts to stand up and say that we shouldn't have immigrants come here, period. Of course, you don't want to say that because then people would ask, well, what the hell are you doing here? And I don't think that he would be comfortable answering that question. And another thing that we have to keep in mind is this noise that you hear out of red state politicians. Oh, the border, you know, we're being invaded by the border. They're coming across the border. Well, number one, when Joe Biden got booed at the State of the Union by the Republicans because he chose to talk about the fentanyl problems that we're having in this country. The Republicans, they seem to want to forget that the majority of this fentanyl, it's being brought into this country not by starving, frightened immigrants. That's a small amount, or as we used to say during NOM, that's just TT. The mass majority of fentanyl is brought into this country by Americans that go down south of the border because they can pick up fentanyl cheap. See? And this is what I mean about the Republican Party. Now, I tell you who is invading the United States. It's the red states with their gun laws, or should I say, non-existent gun laws. That is what is invading us. And I don't want to sound like a Republican, but I do pray for the poor kids that got killed at that campus in Michigan. I think it's a disgrace. I think it's a disgrace that in a country such as ours, in the 21st century, that we have a bunch of politicians who are afraid to bring out common sense solutions. What is wrong with national registration? When you buy a car, you have to have you have to be registered. You have to be licensed. The car has to be registered. You have to be insured. Now, if you could do that with a damn automobile, why the hell can't you do that with a weapon of death? Okay? Oh, and just to bring in another point to that red state person who votes Republican all the time and is obviously uninformed, there's a big difference between angry people in the community, angry because unarmed people keep winding up dead at the hands of their local law enforcement, all right? There's a difference between that and between trying to make sure that law enforcement officers do not just randomly kill people who happen to be unarmed. Because, see, once you put on that uniform, or once you're given that badge, you're given that weapon. And that weapon is basically the power of life and death. And that's the difference. There's a difference between some street punk trying to rip someone off and an officer of the law killing an unarmed person. It's a hell of a difference. And if you can't understand that difference, I'm sorry you didn't go to school, okay? Now, give you an example of the conservative mind of today, all right? Unfortunately, we're not talking about William F. Buckley. God, I wish he was. I wish he was still around, okay? Because at that time, conservatives, at least you could just, disagree with them. But they weren't the insane maniacs, unfortunately, that they have basically decided to hang their hats on of what we have today, passing for conservatives. You have Nazis out here now. You don't have conservatives, right? The state of Missouri. Now, who hangs out in Missouri, as they call it? Josh Hawley. Yes, fastest guy since Jesse Owens. I remember him. That's the guy running around giving the fist sign on that January 6th, stirring up the mad, bloodthirsty crowd out there. He comes out there, hey, run on, let's get him, right? And then when he saw just how hostile supposedly his people were, he took off like a rabbit with a hot poker stuck up his butt, quite frankly. He did beat Jesse Owens' time. He was moving so fast, right? That's Missouri. That's the kind of person they put in for the United States Senator. The same state, show you how bonkers they are. Their state legislation, right? People say, okay, we want marijuana, we want this, made legal. So now their state legislature is trying to figure out ways to overrule the will of the public. And I got one even better. I can't believe it. It's not funny, but it's so sad that you gotta laugh. You gotta crack a smile, or you go out of your bloody mind. State legislature in Missouri, right? They are terrified of drag shows. Yeah, drag shows. Um, they are terrified of that. If they had their way, and who knows, they just might, they would lock you up for 20 years for performing in a drag show, right? Now, these same clowns, and I do mean clowns, they just passed the law, right? Or I should say they're working on it. Well, it will pass. I'm sure it will pass. In Missouri? Yeah. 14-year-olds will be able to walk the streets of Missouri, right? What do they call that? Open carry. In other words, you're going to give 14-year-old kids, and this is really without any kind of training or supervision, you are going to give a 14-year-old kid the right to walk through the streets openly, bearing arms, carrying weapons, right? So he can get a 45, get his little holster, and just walk down the damn street. Now, in this country, you got 80-year-olds that should not be trusted with firearms. Why in the hell are you going to trust a 14-year-old? I think that there has to come a point in this country that you have to look at the judiciary. Because when there's a judge, that doesn't make you infallible. And we really have to take a good hard look at this. Now, my personal opinion, we need to throw out half those bozos in the Supreme Court. We should have the right to protect ourselves from them. That's how women have lost their right of choice. You're telling over half the population that a right that they have has now been taken away. See, by that logic, you have the right to bring back slavery. I mean, I'm quite sure they would try to figure out all kinds of fancy ways of putting it. But taking away a right in America is taking away a right in America. And I believe that when judges do that sort of thing, it is time for somebody, for the community to step in. See, this is the thing that the Republicans, the conservatives, the so-called religious fundamentalists, or religious, as some of them call themselves, religious freedom fighters, see, this is what they don't get, all right? Rights. Our country was set up, the laws were set up in such a way so that, boom, here goes your rights here, okay? These are yours. No one can mess with that. Unfortunately, with these people, let's all put them in the right, they want to have the right to have their rights and the right to take away your rights. See? Of all the things I'm speaking about today that gets me angry, the most angry, believe it or not, it's about a woman's right to choice being taken away. Because you will find in every society where they go to autocracy, dictatorship, all right, it always starts with the women. Because once you start taking away the rights of women, then you come after men. And see, I try to explain to people, I'm just like anyone else, right? It's not so much, it should, But usually, it's not altruism that moves people the most. It's the idea that if that bastard can do that to him or to her, they can do it to me. And that is what is going off in my head like a, how did Jefferson say it? Like a fire bell in the night. That's why most of these so-called, religious nationalists, and really that's what they are. They feel that their way to worship, how they worship, that's the way it's supposed to be done. Everyone else are demons. You can't operate a democracy, a functioning democracy like that, right? People have a right to discover their own spirituality or the lack thereof. But that is an individual choice, right? And what these right-wing bastards want to do, they basically want you to live according to their precepts. And if you don't live that way, we're going to put you in jail. And that is not what America is meant to be. I'm sorry. I read the manual, okay? And see, that's why it is so important that we try to get that Republican Party voted out of existence until people who are truly Republicans, like the home and neighborhood I grew up in, right here in Harlem, when they get control of the party again, then I will stop calling the Republicans the new Nazi party. But until that time, that's exactly what they are. I call it like I see it. And I'll remind you, Hitler and Mussolini, both of them, what were the first great treaties that they made? When you start a new government or you take over a government, there's always something that you do on the world stage to let the world know, hey, I'm here. Well, it's ironic, both Mussolini and Adolf Hitler, they did the same type of thing. They made their treaty, Catholicism is also a branch of Christianity. And what they did, they made a treaty with the Pope in Rome. Yeah, they're saying, yeah, we're Christians too. And they made a deal. And, I can't imagine what an intelligent, educated Roman Catholic in 1934, right? I can't fathom how they were able to handle that. I know a lot of the Catholics didn't, thank God. But see, that's why be careful when folks basically try to hit you with the God stick, all right? Because those people are trying to do something, basically they're trying to tell you, well, if you're not doing as I say, then you're against God. And that's what we have a perfect example of that in Florida with DeSantis. You can say this, you can read that, you can look at that, but you can't look at this. Is this America? And oh, by the way, all you Floridians down there who originally, who call yourself, I'm running away from New York. Good. Now, when you buy your little property down there, or if you, been there for a while and you already have your house or what have you, what are you going to do with all those insurance companies leaving? Of course they're leaving. They're getting the hell out of there. Why? Because Florida is climate disaster central. And eventually it's going to hit upon the insurance corporations. Wait a minute, why do I keep insuring these bozos the same place, the same time? They're going to be swept through by a damn hurricane over and over again. climate change is real. And that's another thing. You got a state that is, once again, climate change central. And most of the representatives from that state don't believe in climate change. So if I'm an insurance company, what am I supposed to do? They're not doing anything to try and, ameliorate the ravages of climate change and what it's doing to that state. At night, there are parts of Miami you can't walk around because the water keeps rising. You can't build along the coast like you used to because the water has weakened, any kind of foundation. That's what happened. When was that? Last year or the year before? That building complex came down, literally just fell down because of the damage done by the water. Yet, these people are having this terrible time with the damn insurance rates. DeSantis has state money that he can use to fly immigrants across the country. Hey, I'm going to fly them to New York. Oh, no, I'm going to fly them up to Boston this time. No, I'm going to fly them to LA this time. And meanwhile, the people of his state are suffering. But he's more concerned about people reading books about Hank Aaron and Frederick Douglass than he is about taking care of the people of his state and what they need. But see, DeSantis is one of those people. He got to think about black folks. You know that because he sends the state police to their homes to scare them from voting. It's like the old George Wallace. And I say old because there came a time in George Wallace's life when he publicly admitted that he was ashamed of all of his racist antics. Remember, he was the one that stood in front of the schoolhouse door. And that's the same type of thing that he's doing in Florida, right? No black history, no black voting rights in Florida. And see, I'm going to tell you something. I don't believe that DeSantis will ever become president of the United States. Knock on wood. I'll tell you why. Because I don't think the American people want to. Now, I enjoyed the 60s and the early 70s, but it's kind of one of those things that it was a good thing to go through, but my God, we shouldn't have to go through it again, right? The 60s brought out fair voting in America because before 1965, you didn't have legitimate voting in this country. How could you? Over a third of the population was not allowed to vote. You had poll tax, you had this, you had that, you had outright, boy, if you try to vote, I'm going to blow your house up. And they did. Remember those 4 little girls that were blown to bits in Birmingham, Alabama at that church? Because their parents and others in the congregation were organizing a big voter drive. And so Klansfolk got together and planted bombs. And no one, I don't think anyone ever went to jail for killing those little girls. But see, that's the thing about DeSantis. I don't think that the American, even white Americans who may have problems or issues with, dark-skinned people, I think even a lot of folks like that will reject DeSantis. Because number one, he's an embarrassment to the United States. And number two, like I said before, people just, we want to learn from those days, but we don't want to live through them again. And that's all DeSantis wants. Because he is the part of the Republican Party that is giving it that look of what I would call new Nazism. They believe, and I'm going to stand by for this one, but it must be said, they believe that their only way to power is to ferment a race war. Yeah, I said it. They feel the only way they can win an election is to have white people afraid or hateful of black, most types of Hispanics, Asians, Jews, Native Americans. Yeah, that's what they, look at what they've been doing. Look at what they've been saying, right? I'll give DeSantis credit for one thing. He means what he says. And when he tries to stop black folks from voting, that's exactly what that's what he sets out to do. And the Democratic Party needs to realize this, because in the Republican Party, you have a party that, generally speaking, 2/3 of the country really despises them, right? Even when they come across on a rare occasion with a good idea, the majority of the country still looks upon them as being despicable. Anyone that tries to help working class white Americans, you know what they call them? Oh, well, there he goes with his socialistic, communistic BS. And, why is it that anybody that's trying to help people in this country, you call them a communist or a socialist? I mean, why is that? That was what they called King. I don't know where these politicians, especially like Alabama, Oklahoma, Arkansas, South Carolina, right? I don't know where they get this crap from about, oh yes, well today we celebrate Martin Luther King Day and everything that he stood for and blah, 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 and treating all people according to their character. And listen, let me tell you something. And I met Martin Luther King, right, twice. Right here in New York, in Riverside Church. And it's funny because my mom pulled me by my ear and said, boy, you going up to Riverside Church today. And I'm like, why, Mom? She said, because Martin Luther King is going to be there. And she loved him. She truly did. Because she was from Virginia, Central Virginia, girl right out of Richmond. And she grew up when they had a hard-ass segregation. As a matter of fact, literally, that's what her and her girlfriend, they decided one night, we're getting the hell out of here. And we're going to New York. Because, I mean, she had recently had I think it was an uncle or someone that had been lynched. And she had just had it up to here. So her and her girlfriend hopped on the train and came up here to New York. So, of course, when she sees King coming out, she loved him, because the man was basically breaking the chains that held black folks back for so long. And I tell you something, it's funny because now you got, what's her face, Nikki Haley. And she is such a damn phony. See, this is what I mean with the Democrats. What we have to do, we have to basically fight that whole party, not just worry about fighting Trump or worry about fighting DeSantis. You have to fight that whole damn party and what it has become. Because this woman, Haley, right? You see her in 2015, 2016, and she's calling Trump one of the worst racists ever born, right? What did she say? Oh, well, I can't support a man that doesn't, won't admit that the Ku Klux Klan is evil. I mean, she was saying words to that effect about Trump, which is cool, right? I mean, because it's the truth. But then what happens? He gets the party's nomination, he wins the election, and just about all of them, she's down she's on her knees, right, with her hand out. Oh, please, I would love to be your ambassador to the United Nations. And she couldn't stop shouting his praises. This is the woman when they told her, look, you need to take down that damn Confederate flag. This is America, right? They lost that rebellion. Take the flag down. She wouldn't take it down because she would put out that crap about, oh, well, it's not about racism, it's about heritage. Yes, it is about heritage. Your state's heritage of owning slaves. And, it's amazing. What's his name? Stephen Alexander. If I'm not mistaken, he was a congressman or senator from South Carolina. And then at the beginning of the Civil War, he became the vice president of the Confederacy. And on the Confederate Constitution, which they borrowed most of it from the United States Constitution, they start off by saying, yeah, we want to break from the Union because they don't believe in slavery, and we do. Look it up, people. You don't have to take my word for it. So this crap that Nikki Haley is talking about, well, it's just heritage. She's full of it. When she was coming up in politics, she used to talk about how her family was discriminated against because of the fact that they were Sikhs. And well, I laugh, forgive me, but the intellectual fervor of South Carolina, especially when you're talking 30, 40 years ago, all right? They didn't know what the hell a Sikh was. You know what? When you started seeing more people from India and other places, and the people are not white, they might be Malaysian or they might be from India or Sri Lanka or whatever, their thing was, what kind of nigger is you? Okay? That's what they say. That's what they used to say in the South. They were still saying that when I was stationed on the Nimitz, and we were out of Norfolk, the naval base at Norfolk. And that's like the early 80s, right? So it ain't been that long. And she makes this statement about, well, Joe Biden and who he say, Kamala Harris, they say America is racist. And naturally, she's in South Carolina, so all the people say, whoa. And she said, no, we're not racist. Yet she was, earlier in her career, she would talk about the racism that she herself personally was subjected to growing up in South Carolina. Now, frankly, I don't know why in the hell someone from the Indian subcontinent would go to live in a place like South Carolina. I really don't. South Carolina, a state that's famous for lynching, right? Starting the American Civil War. Why would a person of color come to South Carolina? Well, each to his own. But I can't stand hypocrisy. I truly can't. And that's what Nikki Haley is. As a matter of fact, she is like the typical Republican. You are racist as all hell. You are autocratic, a believer in an autocratic system, right? Or you are just too much of a coward to speak up when you see something is wrong. But that's basically what your Republican Party of 2023 is all about. And, I'm not, going to work every day, riding the subway, and, bolts of lightning with super knowledge is, electrifying me or anything. This is common sense and common observation. This is what they are. This is what they believe. This is what they say they believe. If you're trying to help white folks, you're a socialist or a communist, right? If you are trying to help people of color, you're a socialist or a communist. Bottom line is, when you're trying to help the mass majority of American people, no matter what color they are, you are a socialist or a communist. Now, that's the way it is, people. Like it, leave it, lump it. It's in the book. Question is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to vote? What are you going to vote for? A party that wants to spend its time chasing trans people? You know how many trans people there are in this country? I think it's something like about 0.0003. We have what, 350 million people in this country? So you figure it out. You figure out the math. But that's what the Republican Party wants to spend its time doing. Oh, and I forget, ladies, we must investigate your hoo-hoo. Okay? Yeah, we got to get into your business, right? That's all they're about. Oh, but hey, if the guy you lives with decides to bust you across the jaw, we're going to take our own sweet time about fashioning laws that might be of some help in protecting you. Now, is that the kind of folks that you want controlling the destiny of this country? This thing with the budget. The Republicans want to say, yeah, this is the hill that we're willing to die on. Wait a minute, man. What are you talking about? The budget, the debt ceiling? Yo, this is about stuff that we've already done, okay? It has nothing to do with somebody trying to accumulate more debt. Most of this debt was a present to us from Donald Trump. He ran up the debt more than everything that we have done for the last, 250 years, right? Trump spent that in 4 years. See, this is the Republican for the the latter part of the 20th century going into the 21st century. This has been the Republican playbook. They get their hands behind the wheel. They screw up the economy. They give huge tax breaks to the most wealthiest people, to the corporations. In other words, they totally F up the economy. And then what happens, the Democrats have to come in, fix everything, right? It's happened with Herbert Hoover. right? The Republicans had a hot streak from, what, 1920? All the way up until 1929. And all that overspending and what have you, the economy just went whack. And well, you know the story, Great World Depression in the Western world, right? Which, by the way, helped to bring about Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, etc. It took FDR, and yes, FDR did pull us out of the Great Depression. I know that that's another one of those fairy tales that Republicans like to, well, it really wasn't FDR that saved America from the Great Depression. Actually, it was World War II. We started sending products to Britain and France, to the Allies in 1939, which really started to put our factories to work. So no, FDR was not responsible for America coming out of the New Deal. Coming out of the Great Depression. Well, that's bullshit. And people who lived through those times will tell you that, right? That's why even now you go out in New Jersey somewhere, you got some old codgers, or even those fools that left New York and ran down to Florida, right? And they will tell you, I knew one guy, and this was the first time I was in the service. It was like 71, and I was 17. I knew this guy. He was Sergeant E8, and he was a cool dude. What's his name? Dobbins, First Sergeant Dobbins, and he would tell stories, right, about how one night him and his baby brother, they hit a train. I said hit a train. Like, yeah, they got the safe, went to the mail car and stole money or bonds. No. When I say hit a train, the produce, a produce part of the car was carrying potatoes. Him and his brother stole a big sack of potatoes and brought it home. Oddly enough, right out there in Jersey, because that was the funny thing about it. Because my first time around, I did boot camp at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And they lived in Jersey. Where did he say it was? Teaneck? Anyway, they grabbed the potatoes and saved their family from starving to death. And he, even at that time, when he talked about FDR, you could see the tears starting to come in his eyes. People, I think he's up there with Lincoln as far as being one of our best loved presidents, because he actually did things for people. And you know what? He was a member of the 1% in this country. Yeah. Roosevelt, oh goodness. In New York, Massachusetts, Jersey, you are Roosevelt, that's saying something, right? They were right up there with the original founders. They were like the people that came over on the Mayflower. They were America, just like the Bush family, And Roosevelt, FDR had the sense to say, hey, if I'm going to save capitalism, I'm going to have to save the working class. And you know what? All his fellow class members condemned FDR for being a traitor to his class. And he's what? A socialist. He's what? A communist. Now, where have we heard this before? Funny thing though, they said the same thing about his second cousin, Teddy Roosevelt, right? Because Teddy had some of the same, how do they call them? wild, crazy, radical socialist ideas. Now, at that time, Teddy, because we're talking like 1901, 1903, that time period, beginning of the 20th century, he wasn't able to go as big as Franklin would be able to do later, but it's along that same stream. Anytime that you try to do something big and large that will help the American working person,